Nearly mobbed by the few dozen surviving dark elves who wanted nothing more than to escape back into their protective city, we briskly stepped along the well-used city entrance, passing through the opened gate and into a small courtyard beyond. As most of the elves quickly disappeared into the city, we were stopped by several drow wearing black plate armor and holding long swords that were both attractive as well as deadly. One of the elves held out his hand to stop, which we agreed to at once. Wanting to show respect to these dark elves and not anger them in any way, I then ordered my party to sheath our weapons and wait for them to speak. One of the drow took a cautious step toward me, looked us all over suspiciously, then ordered his own troops to lower their weapons as well, apparently calling a truce. "You saved a lot of dark elves out there," the warrior began, still suspicious but showing respect. "Well, grant you that." The dark elf then approached me to within a few feet, still rather distrustful. "We don't take kindly to strangers, normally, you'd be dead by now. But you did just save a lot of lives, so we will let you live, for now. Conduct your business and leave quickly, and know we will be watching your every move." Not exactly a warm welcome to the city. "We're not here to cause trouble," Kartha insisted with a soft smile. "Actually, we're a lot like you here, enemies now of the inner circle and on the run. But while we're here, we can treat your sick and injured if you wish." "Half our population is sick or injured," the drow warrior responded, not totally believing Kartha's offer. "Do what you can for them, I suppose." "What were those things attacking outside?" Eswin asked, quite concerned. "They are the old gods, come to destroy us we think," the dark elf answered, even more concerned than Eswin. "Until recently, they were peaceful treants dwelling in the large central forest of our island nation. We left them alone and they left us alone. But something happened to them. They're not just bloodthirsty now, but they can literally suck out the very life from all they attack." "The old gods?" Kartha inquired. "Can you tell us more?" The dark elf sighed deeply before continuing. "What else would you call them? The treants were here long before the circle banished our forefathers to this miserable island a millennium ago. Those tree monsters were hostile toward us for centuries, especially as we used the forest to help build our city here. They had been rather peaceful, however, for the past few decades. Nobody knows why they've suddenly become so hostile again. Or monstrous?" Sainairs asked, almost as if he knew something the rest of us did not. All eyes turned to Sainairs. Apparently not wanting to divulge anything directly before the dark elves, however, Sainairs' reply was simple and, for now, final. "Lomtora, I will explain later, once we can find a hostel and gain some privacy." A little surprised with Sainairs, Kartha spoke next, addressing the dark elf directly. "Is there anything else we should know before entering your city?" "Something else is wrong," the dark elf continued, either fearful or embarrassed. "There is a sickness in the air, causing most of us to wither and weaken. We're all constantly tired, our bodies ache and we struggle to breathe at times. It's like we're cursed, probably from the inner circle." "And when did this sickness start?" Kartha continued, genuinely concerned now for the dark elves. "A year or so," the soldier responded, becoming noticeably upset. "And now that you're here, you will probably be sickened too." All of us looked to one another with great concern, as if fighting off the inner circle and then the cursed treants weren't enough. Now it appeared we would have to deal with some sort of local pandemic. Ariana then asked yet another question of the dark elf. "Who knows more about this sickness that we can talk to?" "Go see Lord de Enzith in the Power Tower," the drow responded, about to leave. "Hell want to see you anyway, especially you, humans." And with that, the three dark elf soldiers turned and walked away, ending the brief encounter. We were now free to enter the small city of Leekly and interact with all the dark elves here. That said, the drow didn't like us here and certainly didn't trust us, so we shouldn't expect our interactions with most of them to go well. I needed to be wary of everyone we talked to, always have our weapons ready and not trust anyone. If we did that, hopefully our time here in Leekly would go fairly smoothly. Heading south, we approached a large, circular, and well-maintained floral garden completely dominating the northern edge of the city's power tower. It reminded me of the power tower back in EAA and all the white roses that Queen Delpana had growing there. I didn't see any actual white roses here, but I was surprised by the full breadth and diversity of all the flowering plants. As we entered the garden, I spied a few dark elves watching us warily from a distance and I sensed, once again, that we were truly unwanted here. Looking around, we strolled deeper into the park, pleasantly surprised by the beautiful garden growing all about. Nearing the center of the park, we then reached a tall stone wall covered in vines and vegetation, similar to the larger wall that enclosed the city of Kathleen back in Pirapa. I didn't realize the drow were so into botany like this. Eswin mumbled, looking about. They're still elves, Ariana responded with a smile. We see a beauty to everything natural. Over here. Redfern shouted, drawing our attention. Having found a closed but unlocked door in the stone wall, itself covered in vegetation, Redfern waited for everyone to join him, then opened the door, leading us into the garden's inner sanctum. My heroes entered a completely walled space about 30 feet in diameter and covered in not just plants but many trees as well, a garden within a garden. In the exact center of the space, several drow guards were apparently fighting with what appeared to be a large tree that was moving on its own and resisting them. By the looks of things, the drow guards were battling one of the cursed treants we had just fought outside the city earlier, and the treant was merely defending itself. Watching the combat for a few moments, I noticed that the old god wasn't quite as large as the ones we had fought outside the city earlier. I also noticed that the creature didn't appear to be attacking the elves but was merely defending itself. It also had not even tried to suck the life out of any of the elves, leading me to suspect that this cursed treant may not be so cursed. The dark elves finally eyed my party and demanded that we come and help put the monster down. What to do? Electing to study the creature a little more, my intuition told me that this treant was not the same as the ones we had fought earlier, and that we needed to try and save it, not kill it. Your orders. Eswin cried to me, needing a quick decision. What should we do? It does not deserve to die. I replied, a surprising change of heart. Let's save the creature. Are you mad? Sainairs wondered aloud. It's an old god, it needs to be destroyed. Maybe not, Kartha countered, eyeing me and then the treant again. This one does seem different. Eswin looked to Kartha, then to me, deciding for himself how best to respond. He then led the party to the 3 drow guards, not to assist them but to intervene against them. Out of our way, human. One of the elves commanded after Eswin parried several of his blows meant for the treant. Following Eswin's lead, Ariana and Redfern intervened as well, and quickly we were able to wedge ourselves between the flailing treant and the 3 dark elf combatants, curtailing their attacks. What are you doing? Another drow demanded to know. This treant does not deserve to die. I commanded, weapon ready. We're here to defend it. It's out of control. The first drow cried, disbelieving that we would stand against them. Our orders are to put it down. Eswin looked to me again, nodded, then turned back toward the 3 drow guards. We're canceling your orders. Our orders are to put the treant down. The first dark elf complained again, angry with all of us. Why are you interfering? What's an old god doing here, in the center of this beautiful garden? Ariana asked, her own elvish ancestry helping to break the ice with the 3 drow. This was once a treant, the same drow responded, sheathing his weapon. It had lived here for decades and was trusted, even well liked. But something recently turned it feral and it needs to be culled. This one is different, I responded, turning back to the treant just 10 feet away, nearly in striking range. Kartha, do you feel it, too? I do, the mutant replied, already turned toward the creature. It seems magically cursed, but not inherently evil. Can you try talking to it? Ariana asked, the young elf always hopeful. Kartha nodded, and as all eyes turned to her, she slowly and bravely approached the treant, her weapon stowed away and the priestess vulnerable. Staring intently at the treant, the large creature at first thrust its branches at Kartha, warning her to stay back. But the mutant was persistent, and ever so slowly she made her way to the tree-like man, dodging a few more thrusts and talking as softly yet as encouragingly as she could. Kartha soon stepped alongside the treant and reached out to it, placing a warm and comforting hand upon its rough and bleeding bark. The area now deathly quiet, Kartha closed her eyes and began to hum, attempting to use her magic to further interact with the tree. Recognizing what she must do to save the treant, at least for a little longer, Kartha not only flooded the creature with her healing energies but even sacrificed a small amount of her own health. In return, however, the golden light of Kartha's magic flooded the garden sanctum, filling the treant with healing energy and saving it from certain death. As the transfer of life continued, our party instinctively approached Kartha, the experience wondrous to behold. Kartha's spell finally concluded and the golden light faded, the priestess falling backward in utter exhaustion. The treant gently caught her in one of its many branches, however, and returned her to our party, turning to address all of us with a firm, steady voice. This, cleric, has saved my life, for now at least, the great woody creature began, its mood and behavior totally different now. Never before have I seen such compassion, you are a credit to your species. Kartha simply nodded, still quite tired from the experience but satisfied with its results. The treant then turned toward the 3 dark elves standing there, all of them shocked by the sudden turn of events. But you 3, you, who are the real monsters here? The woody creature cried, pointing one of its branches at the drow. Your kind are like rats, creeping about in the dark and doing harm wherever you go. Be gone from my garden, and don't ever come back. Fixated on the intimidating treant, the trio of elves looked at me and then scurried away, just like rats, quickly gone. Can you tell us what's happening here in Leakley? Ariana boldly asked, the very question on my mind as well. The treant turned its attention from the departing drow back to my party, gently answering Ariana's question. I am Sereros, and I've lived here within this grove for many decades, born as a seedling here and guarding the dark elf children of Leakley as they, too, were born and raised here. I do not like these dark elves, but the children always treated me with kindness and respect, and I grew attached to them as well. A year ago, however, something changed, Sereros continued, hanging his head. Something, magical, began absorbing all life within the city, even the entire island. I watched as countless drow quickly aged, the older elves soon dying of old age and the children turned into adults and then older adults within just a season or 2. And this sickness has affected even me, forcing me into a sort of madness, where my rage and hatred suddenly knows no bounds. Describe this madness you've felt, I asked, wanting to know more. I am cursed, Sereros replied with a frown. The xylem and phloem are no longer enough, I feel the need to consume the living souls of those around me. I have restored you, for now at least, Kartha encouraged the treant. We will find and nullify the magic causing this as soon as we can. Sereros held his head high and nodded, so grateful for the gift that Kartha had bestowed. Is there anything else you can tell us? Eswin asked, hoping to learn more. I don't know if this is relevant, but the dark elves had been preparing for war, Sereros continued. I don't know anything more, but now that half of their people have died from the sickness and the rest are aging so quickly, I doubt they can fulfill their plans. Perhaps it was their adversaries who afflicted the elves with this terrible curse in the first place. War? Redfern asked, intrigued. War with whom? I don't know, the treant honestly replied. But you won't find answers here, go to the forest and seek Willowheart, queen of the treants. She will know more. We need to find who is causing this curse and stop it. Eswin summarized, quite the challenging proposition. If we don't, we may succumb to this magical aging as well, our lives are just as much at risk now as all the remaining elves here. Very much so, Sereros added. Go, learn what you can, find the source of the sickness and put a permanent end to it. And thank you for restoring me. Kartha smiled again and Sereros gently patted her head with his branches, their bond quite strong now. The successful encounter over, I quickly led my heroes back out to the garden entrance, far better recognizing now what we needed to do here in Grim Tier. Returning to the garden entrance, exits led away in each of the 4 cardinal directions, the city's main gate to the north and the power tower to the south. For no particular reason we decided to turn west and see what there was to find there. Passing by a pagan shrine to the north and the city tavern to the south, we soon reached a large campground. Hundreds of small, discolored, torn tents taking up nearly every inch of ground. Several dozen dark elves gazed at us from various vantage points throughout the camp, eyeing us with both hopelessness as well as genuine suspicion. These elves aren't just destitute, Ariana began, truly hurt by the extremely sad situation here. They're suffering physically, something is very wrong with them. As we approached, the dark elves who still had the strength to get up and move scampered away, clearly not interested in being anywhere near our advancing party. However, that still left at least a dozen of these dark-skinned creatures for us to examine more closely. Reaching them, we could see that most were sleeping, passed out or perhaps even deceased, elves we should leave alone. Hence, we were free to question the few that were conscious, but as we approached, it was clear they wanted nothing to do with us. Elvenkind, we would help you if you let us, Redfern began, trying to gain the trust of the dark elves here. Why are you all here? There ain't no help for us anywhere, came an old, hoarse voice from behind. Turning around, we found an extremely old dark elf sitting on a rotting wooden bench, some worn blankets barely covering him. As dark elves go, we guessed that he was probably a few centuries old. The only one to actually reply to our initial query, we turned in his direction to continue the conversation. The Drow don't see many visitors to its capital city, Ariana began, looking around. So this campsite must be filled with townspeople, why is that? Aren't you a sassy one? The old dark elf replied, looking her over with some surprise. What business of yours is it to even ask? We are concerned for all the dark elves here, Kartha added with a gentle smile. The old drow looked us over, quite mistrusting. Well, that's something different, the ancient dark elf exclaimed, genuinely surprised. It's every elf for himself around here. What do you have in mind? Old man, why are there so many townspeople here? Eswin tried again, repeating Ariana's original question, but not quite as nicely. I am 37, I am not old, came the surprising response. My heroes looked the old man over for a few moments, assuming he was not being truthful. No offense, but you look to be at least a century old, perhaps older, Ariana responded. I am painfully aware of that, Wood Elf, the drow returned, quite distressed. Look at me, I am 37 years old and I have the body of someone 5 times older. If you really want to help, do something about how old I've become. How can that be? Sainairs asked, disbelieving the drow elf. Don't lie to us. I am telling you, I am only 37. A year ago, I was as healthy as a horse, but something's happened here in the city, throughout the entire island, the aging sickness has spread everywhere. While I couldn't be sure of course, the dark elf didn't seem to be lying, something had unnaturally aged him entire decades in less than a year. That's consistent with what the treant told us, Kartha added, still not quite healed from her sacrifice. This aging sickness appears widespread. What more can you tell us about this aging sickness? Redfern asked, intrigued. And how many have been afflicted? It started about a year ago, the old drow responded, some panic in his voice. I started feeling more tired than usual. After some time, simple, ordinary chores became harder and more painful, I started losing hair, developing wrinkles on my face and all that. Now, it's all I can do to just beg for food and stay alive, I have no strength, ambition, hope. The story being told by the old dark elf was as sad as it was frightening. I had never heard of anything that could rob the young of their youth like this, and I began to recognize that something very sinister was occurring here in Grimtier. Longtora, look around. Kartha suggested, the party turning its attention from the old drow to all the pathetic townspeople throughout the campground. Instantly, I recognized that everyone here was old and frail as well, most of them too weak to even fend for themselves and likely to die very soon now. Everyone here is suffering from this aging disease? Kartha asked, nearly heartbroken for them. Once the city recognized what was happening, it ordered those afflicted here to this open area, where the old could be kept away from everyone else. It didn't matter, a lot of us got the disease anyway, but this is where we've been brought to die. May we examine you? Kartha gently asked the old elf with a soft, reassuring smile. The drow agreed and Kartha began to carefully examine him, followed shortly by Sainairs and then the rest of my party. The hapless humanoid wasn't exactly thrilled by all the sudden attention, but he allowed it to happen over the next few minutes. He's telling the truth, Kartha finally acknowledged. This dark elf is very old and no amount of healing magic would change that. If he's truly just 37 years old, something has robbed him of all his youth. Do you have any idea what happened a year ago to cause this? Redfern continued. None of us realized what was happening until it was too late, the drow elf returned, glad that our party's examination of him was complete. It wasn't long afterwards, however, when those things from the forest began attacking us. The old gods? Sainairs asked, disgusted. We've already encountered them. They seem able to suck the very life force from its victims. Not all that unlike what is happening to these dark elves here in the city, Kartha pointed out. Could this sickness and these old gods attacking the city somehow be related? The gods are angry with us, the drow mumbled, almost as if ashamed. This sickness is their vengeance. Gods? Eswin asked, cynical. What are you talking about? The gods of the forest, the elf continued reluctantly, almost embarrassed. We'd been at peace with them for decades. We reckon old Ballybus did something to break the peace and now they're at our throats again. Who is Ballybus? Redfern asked, the obvious question. The dark elf shrugged his shoulders, indicating he didn't know much. Some old magic user who's been here in Grimtier for decades searching for something in the old forest. The gods had left him alone all this time, but with everything that's happened recently, now we wonder. What are these gods you keep talking about? Ariana asked. The dark elf looked to Ariana then turned away, continuing the conversation. After the Age of Damnation, our forefathers were banished to this island nation for supposedly starting the war. This island was chosen because nobody else could survive here. The gods in the forest destroyed all who came before. Half our population was wiped out the first year, thousands of dark elves. Eventually, over centuries, our forefathers made an uneasy peace with the forest gods. That's the story, anyway. And what, exactly, are these gods? Ariana asked again, genuinely intrigued. They are ancient, vile, life-draining monsters. Sainairs replied with hatred and disgust. There were thousands of them during the Age of Damnation and only Sisla herself was finally able to defeat them. Apparently a few survived here on this island to further attack and destroy. Having recently encountered the cursed treants, the reply of Sainairs made perfect sense and I trusted the response completely. However, the old elf didn't seem to believe it at all, making a peculiar face that led me to believe that, perhaps, Sainairs wasn't exactly correct. Thank you, sir, you've been very helpful, Kartha kindly acknowledged, ending the conversation with the elf. Who should we talk to for more information? I wouldn't trust nobody here, the dark elf responded in a low voice. There is something going on. What? I don't know, but something. I especially wouldn't trust Lord D'Enzith, who's ruled us all for decades. All he wants is might and power so he can one day. The dark elf suddenly stopped, perhaps recognizing that he was about to say too much to a group of strangers. Encouraging the elf to continue, he just shook his head, turned and stumbled away, our encounter with him over. Lord D'Enzith, Eswin began, watching the drow depart. I imagine we will find him in the city's power tower. Perhaps we should go learn what lies he has for us. I would like to know more about this magic user Balibus, Redfern added, turning back to me. It seems there are several mysteries to resolve here in Grimtier, Kartha replied. Let's go look at that pagan shrine next. And that's a wrap of episode number 47, Dark Elf Capital City Part 1. Expect additional episodes every few weeks as the story continues. Looking